Dang, here we are already on week 9 of the spring semester. I believe next week is spring break, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, Anyhow, we're also moving along on Project 2, and our next assignment for Project 2 is this one, finding financial information. And here's the Word doc. We'll take a look at that in a second. And then, of course, the Dropbox for that particular assignment. And I'm going to go through that hopefully thoroughly and kind of let you know what I'm looking at and give you some examples, kind of like I've done with the problem. So, but please make sure you download this and take a look at it, use it for reference, because you'll need to go back and make sure that you've included all these things that are a part of this particular assignment. So I start with you've learned how to find stock quotes. You found the ticker symbol for your company, and often you can just input that into any search engine, and it will take you to a quote for that particular company. Not always. You got to be careful. Remember, tell a quick story. But one time I think it was in my business law class, and I was showing them how the company might go public and they have a ticker symbol, and I put a ticker symbol up there. I think it was for Shake Shack, and I think their ticker symbol was SHAK. And boom, up on the screen, of course, visible to everybody, was the results came back, and there was some gal who that was her nickname, or maybe it was short for Shakira or something like that. I don't remember, but there was some not totally nude photos by any means. She was covered, but a little more risque than probably I wanted to show in my business law class. Anyhow, so I guess if you're doing this in private, it's no big deal. Anyhow, so we're going to start digging then for a little bit more financial information, and really I just want this assignment to be one that gets you to the right places so that you can find the information that you're ultimately going to need to write your paper. And these are the things that I want you to find, right? Sales trend, earnings per share, ROE, etc. So where do we go to find that stuff? The site that I've been using lately that I really like is a site called Seeking Alpha. There is a link for that right here. Okay, that'll open it up, take you right to that Seeking Alpha. You can use other sites, and that's fine. A lot of them have similar information. There's a few nice things that the Seeking Alpha has that I think will give you some shortcuts to answering some of these questions and ultimately doing your final paper. And you'll see that as we go along. But in any event, I ask for these things, and so let's just jump in and see how we can find those things. So let's get to the Seeking Alpha, and once again I went to just Seeking Alpha. I'm using WD-40 as my example. So I type in the ticker symbol, I click on that, and it brings me just to kind of a basic, right? It gives me decent information, news, some different things. These news items and whatnot might be things that you'll ultimately be interested in taking a look at, right, for your own company, and maybe you ought to be following. WD-40 is not doing so well today, but anyhow, so I ask for first, report the sales trend for the past 3 years and calculate the annual growth. So let's take a look. Well, this doesn't give me sales trends, so I'm going to come to financials. Let me click on that. Okay. This can toggle. I had it latest on the left because for me that, I don't know, it's just a little easier to read because it's way over here instead of over here. You may read it differently than I. That's fine, but I like to click on that, have it coming this way. So this is now the column of my most recent. Okay, and this is last year. Their year end was August, which again, corporations can have any kind of a year end that they choose. And so I've said, what's the sales trend? They don't have sales, they have revenues. For our purposes, revenues and sales are going to be synonymous, same thing. Okay, now 3 years. where do I go? Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, kinda. But these are year ends, right? So this was the year end for August. So their sales, yeah. Let's see. So I think I want to use this one because this is my sales at the end of 19. So 1 year to the end of 2020 to the end of 2021. That's 2, and then to the end of 2022 is 3. Okay. So I'm going to use that to get my trend and say that that is 3 years, right? So kind of simplified it, or I've got it already to go here. And I got my present value. I've entered it as a negative number because we have to do that if we're going to calculate what our rate is, and that's what I'm asking for, right? Report the sales trend for the past 3 years, calculate the annual growth rate. Yeah, I might go back and rethink that because for my last 3 years, if I'm looking at the sales trend, it's 408.5 to 488 to 518. So if you were reporting that, you would just simply say that the sales have gone from 408.5 to 518.8, and this is in millions. Should say that someplace. Yeah, someplace around there. I'm sure it says that it's in millions, currency US dollars. Probably says it at the bottom. In any event, yeah, WD-40 is a relatively small company, so I'm pretty sure that that's in millions and not billions. Okay, so let's go back 408.5. So minus 408.5. That's probably, yeah, 3 years is probably still appropriate for that. So now I got to just calculate that rate, right? I just come, I click on my function, I click rate, I go OK, my number of periods. Make sure I enter this as a present value, not as a payment. Mistake that I've seen often made on some of the assignments. And then this is a future value. Okay, 8%. I like to see a couple of decimal points. So an 8.29% growth rate, right? Okay. The next is the earnings per share trend, right? And if I stay on this income and I just scroll down, I'm going to come down here, basic earnings per share. And again, there's also diluted earnings per share down here, and in their case, it's just a very small difference. And why would diluted be a little bit smaller? Again, it's simply because they incorporate there into some options that they might give to some of their employees. In WD-40's case, it's obvious that that's pretty small, that they may give some options, stock options for some of their employees, but probably very few. But if I use the same thing, I go from 440, well, I'm sorry, let's go up here to the basic earnings, from 441 to 491. Change that to minus 4.41 and 491. You know what, I can just kind of copy this and paste it here because it's going to be the same. So my earnings per share have only grown by 3.64%. That's kind of interesting. My revenues have grown, by 8%, but my earnings per share, I'm already thinking there's something wrong. They're growing their sales, but they're not growing their earnings by quite as much. And maybe I'll discover that, as I go along here a little bit. But report the most recent ROE. This one's relatively simple for you. If you come back up here, okay, you go through this. This probably for Seeking Alpha, maybe not their best. I've seen some other programs that give better readouts in terms of their ROE, ROA, and some of those other ratios. But look at that, return on common equity, okay, and that's what we're looking for. Return on common equity is ROE, okay. And this is for TTM, okay? So if you use Seeking Alpha, you should put that then that's for the TTM, or trailing 12 months versus last year end, okay? And again, that's again one of the not so great features of Seeking Alpha that other places might give you, like an ROE for the last couple 2 or 3 years, but we've still got return on common equity, or ROE, okay? 32.09. That's pretty good. Kind of gives you some comparisons to the sector. So it's got a way better return than others in the sector. Yeah, nice. Okay. The other one, before I skip back, is return on assets, and ROA. Okay, and this is total assets. And again, it's TTM, or trailing 12 months, 14.22, and for the sector, 3.82. So WD-40 has a quite substantially better return, ROE and ROA, than others in that same sector, which is probably industrials or something like that. Okay, and we'll find that out later on some later assignments. So, okay, so that answers those. So now we got the first four answered. What's the gross profit trend been for the last 5 years? And this, okay, let's go back to the financials. And I want to show you something. To me, this was a key element for this Seeking Alpha that I really enjoy. Okay, so let's go back. It's what's been the gross profit trend for the last 5 years. Well, it'd be simple to report that, here's 5 years. So it's gone from 225.3 million to 254.8 million. So, the gross profit's increased, but, sales have gone from 408.5 million to 518.8 million. So, it doesn't really tell me that much, okay, if I'm just looking at an absolute basis. So I love coming up here and clicking this. Okay, I get that drop down menu, and I got as a percent of revenue. Okay, and why do I like that? Because it tells a better story. So for WD-40, their gross profit 5 years ago was 55.14% of revenue. Okay, that has fallen to 49.1% of revenue. Okay, starting to develop some thoughts here on what's going on with WD-40 that might help me with my final paper. That margins are getting squeezed a little bit. 49.10% margin is still pretty good, but it's not as good as 55.14, right? So it's gone down a little over 6%. Their gross profit margin, and that's the trend that I would report on to answer that question. You could certainly give the absolute numbers, okay, but I really, really prefer to see, these percentages, okay, because I think that tells a story that margins are being compressed, even though they're able to still maintain a good growth of sales or growth in revenue, okay. So then the next question becomes, what has been the operating expense trend for the last 5 years? These are just two really important items, okay? We know that their margins are getting a little bit compressed. That gross margin's getting a little bit compressed. Maybe that's due to competition. Who knows, okay? Maybe just their costs, right, have gone up in terms of their product acquisition, the raw materials that they bring in to make their WD-40. So let's look at their operating expenses. Okay, and that's another big one. Well, their operating expenses 5 years ago equaled 35.9%, again, of total revenue. Okay, but it's down to 32.27 in their last year. Okay, so they've done a good thing here. They've been able to reduce their operating expenses. This one we want to see go down. From 35.9 to 32.27. So it's down 3.6% almost. So they've improved their operating expenses by 3.6, but they've lost 6% up here. So what's that going to do to my whole operating income? Well, yeah, I'm down about 2.5, somewhere in that neighborhood, 2.4% in terms of operating income based on sales. Okay, again, if I come up here and look at the absolute, my income has increased. Okay, right, 87 from 78.6 up to 87.3. Okay, but I'll bet you that's a much slower growth rate. Well, I know it is, right, because this is earnings per share. So it's a much slower growth rate than my growth in revenue, and that's again it gets back to that margin thing. Okay, so now we've answered the first 6. We got this one. Has the company's long-term debt, if any, increased or decreased over the last 5 years? And by how much? Well, we can come back up here. We're on the financials. We still have that. We go from income statement to balance sheet. Okay. This one I kind of like to leave it on absolute because I just want to see, right? I want to go down here. I can scroll down. I got assets, right? Balance sheets are always going to have assets on top and then liabilities. And what do I ask for? I ask for long-term debt, okay? Short-term debt has a tendency to go up and down just depending on things that are going on. But here, geez, long-term debt, okay? Long-term debt's gone from 62.8 million to 107.1 million dollars. That's a pretty big jump. You know, they've almost doubled their long-term debt. Again, get the wheels clicking, make some notes, okay? Get a little sheet of paper on the side and make some notes that what caused my company's long-term debt to almost double in the last 5 years. You know, is it poor performance? You know, they're still making money. Have they had some acquisitions? Have they done some other things that may have caused them to incur that long-term debt? Okay, those are the questions that I'm going to be asking, right, and that I'll need to find answers for. And so, you know, something like that should jump out at you, and make some notes so that you can address it in your final paper, because those are the things that I'll be looking for. Then lastly, okay, examine the company's most recent annual report and tell me what it does in the words of management. I say it's okay to copy and paste this. Just make sure you tell me what your source is. This is, I think, one of the best things that I like for the Seeking Alpha. Okay. Again, if I come here back to this summary and I click on that, I'm looking for the company's last annual report. I see this thing here called SEC filings. So I'm going to right click on that, maybe open it up in a new tab, and I've already done that here. Okay, and this is what comes up, right? SEC filings. What I'm looking for, so you know, is a 10K. Okay, 10K, which is an annual report. A 10Q is a quarterly report, so I can look at their most recent quarterly report, which might be interesting. But for our purposes and to answer the question, I want to know what the 10K annual report, right? And remember, their year end was August, and so their annual report came out in October. That doesn't seem unusual at all. So again, I'll open this in another tab, which I already have done. And it's going to show up like this. If I were you, I would open it as this PDF and then save it, okay? And if I were you, I'd go back to here and keep scrolling down until you find each of the last 3 or 4 or 5 annual reports, and just save those, you know, to your jump drive on your computer or wherever you want to. They're in a PDF format. They won't take up a lot of space. Okay. For the purposes of this question, which was, right, just tell me in the words of management what the company does. Again, this is an assignment that I want to know that you've opened up the annual report and given it a read. And it's the Form 10K. If you scroll down a little bit, you're going to get to the table of contents. It says item number 1, and this is going to be very, very similar for everybody's company. Item number 1 is business. So I'll click on that, and it'll take me right there. I gotta scroll back up a little bit, but item number 1, business overview. WD-40 Company is a global marketing organization dedicated to creating positive, lasting memory. La da 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 da. First paragraph. You know what? Copy, paste, cite my source. 2022 annual report. WD-40 annual report. I've just answered that question. Okay, that short paragraph. Some of you are going to have longer paragraphs. Some of the companies are going to tell you a little bit. Some of them have far more complicated businesses, and so they'll have more complicated, paragraph telling you what it is that they do. But keep it relatively easy. If you can get to that annual report, you shouldn't have any difficulties. Then one of the first items is going to be the business. Okay, of what that company does, and that's what I'm interested in seeing. Again, not so much that I'm interested in reading about that, but I'm interested in knowing that you found the annual report and that you have found that particular statement. Okay, that should do it for that assignment. So I wish everybody luck, and as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. Thanks, and enjoy, and stay warm.